Good morning. Wow, what a number of people. Good morning. It's good to have you here again. It seems a little that we've seen each other about a month ago. My hair's been growing since then. I think most of you has. Um, it's good to see all of you. Um, let's kick this one off. We're going to talk about GPT-3. That is awesome. This is a streak of webinars that we have. So last month we had a webinar on China, the technology of China and everything that we see happening there. Today is GPT-3. Next month we'll be having a webinar on all the new tech that we've been seeing regarding energy. Also an awesome webinar. But today, GPT-3. Every now and then there comes a technology that we are really excited about. We have a AI team that constantly tries to dive into all new technologies regarding everything, but also AI. And the interesting thing is when we give talks like these, it's to inform you on possible influential technologies. And oftentimes the big story is this time where we are all born in, which is if human history would be a movie, then this is the climax of that movie. And I'm not saying that just because we are born in this time or that we live now, but if you look at the last 200 years or the last 50 years, and if you would compare that to the 200 years all before that, it is utterly anomalous the times that we're living in. We have flying planes, we have driving cars, we are on the phone, we have FaceTime, we have voice assistants, we have the internet. We can record movies like this. We can make pictures. We have 7 billion people instead of under 1. And that is before that I tell you that we can now teach smelling sensors to smell dynamite by putting sensors on a cockroach head and training the sensors to then smell the same thing that a cockroach can. Or it's before that I tell you that the company behind Pokemon Go, Niantic, now spends billions on making a constant live virtual 3D LiDAR map of the world. I mean, we can go on and on and on with things that are completely unique to this 200-year blog versus the ones before. And under that big story is AI. And the revolution that is happening with AI is just one of the symptoms of that whole story. And it's along with revolutions that are happening in either genetic engineering or things like autonomous cars or the brain-machine interfaces or VR. And we think it's going to be some crazy few decades. And what we need is to grasp and think about exponential growth and how the next 5 or 10 years we will see a revolution just in narrow AI, intelligent AI, not that different from the stuff that we have today. But it may be similar to how I think electricity came through in about 10 years' time and infiltrated everything in the 1880s. Or think about it like the internet that did just the same, but then in the 90s and the 2000s. So we think we have a crazy few years ahead of us. And then it can become even weirder beyond that, when AI becomes super intelligent and is by far the smartest thing that this planet has, will then be machines and not humans. So today we're going to give an insight of what that could look like. Not saying we're there yet. Let me really emphasize that we are far from super intelligence. But I think it's time to give you at least a brief update on this new AI algorithm, GPT-3. And we have lots to look forward to today. Tech developments are incredibly important. And that is because we're living in a time where the population of the Earth is increasing by 9,000 people every hour, netto. And that means, in my opinion, that we need all our intelligence, not only to keep the world as it is, or as it was 10 years ago, but to better it. And I'm a firm believer that technology will become a big part in that. And you can see that happening as 1/3 of our whole habitable planet is being used for meat. The artificial meat market is expected to grow 20% every year. You see it in energy. Approximately about 8 million pieces of plastic find their way into our oceans. Yet today, about a quarter of all energy generated globally is renewable. About 900 million people do not have access to electricity, yet Starlink this year will deploy 1,000 satellites to provide worldwide internet access. And then we also have an aging population. It's the first time that we have more people over 65 than people younger than 5 years. Weird times. So I think it's really important to fast forward innovation. And that is what brings us to today. We're hosting this webinar today. We're trying to delve into what GPT-3 is and why we think it's important. We want to give you some insights on the latest developments that have been happening regarding this algorithm the last couple of months. And my colleague Mirko will give some live demos. What's in it for you? We want you to understand what GPT-3 is. We want you to find some example cases that you can then use maybe to see what it can do for your business. And we want you to get a grasp of late developments in language models and why they are so important. We'll start off with an intro. This is the intro by me. Then Mirko, a really, really valued colleague, will give you his GPT-3 basics and examples, and he'll do the live demo. And afterwards, we have a Q&A. It looks like this. It'll be 60 minutes, 45 minutes talks, about 15 minutes Q&A. The chat is moderated for questions. So if you ask them, I do encourage you, do use the chat. My colleague will try to moderate most questions. At the end of the day, you'll be having a report by us or an ebook by us. And we'll be sending a recording of this webinar. To let you know, we take COVID really, really seriously. Our gear is disinfected. Mirko has his own microphone. We'll try to make sure that we keep distance. Also during the Q&A. A little bit on Bit, and then Mirko is on. So we are a research and prototyping studio. We're based in Amsterdam and Delft. We have research teams and prototype teams. Our research team constantly tries to look out for the latest tech developments around the world in universities and business. And then we have a prototype team that tries to validate these technologies for our clients. And this way, we aim to fast forward innovations, since we believe that the world will become better if we use new technologies in a wise way. So if we scout technologies, we have what we call the maturity wave. We try to look at technology and see whether they're still in science fiction. We can think about them, but we have no grasp of how to build them. What we then see is new technologies coming on in the lab prototype. If it gets out of lab, it starts having first applications in startups and business. From there on, we think things are potential unlocked, and at the end, technologies will become mainstream. We think GPT-3 is somewhere between lab prototype at the end stage there, and we're starting to see some first applications. And if you would plot it on the Foros scope or the future scope by Foros, we think that it's definitely probable that language models like GPT-3 will be mainstream in the future. So we constantly do exploration and validate these new technologies so that our clients can then take that to exploitation. If we score technologies, we check whether they're feasible, viable, and desirable. We think GPT-3 will be big. And like I said, my really valued colleague Mirko is enthusiastic about it and can tell you more about it. Grab your mic and have fun, people.
All right. Thanks, Marco, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone, at this webinar. For those who have seen the previous one on GPT-3 in September, welcome back. Like Marco said, GPT-3 is the biggest innovation in language models in AI from the last year. I want to start with 2 examples to show what it can do. The first example is to generate faces with your own specifications. So using GPT-3, we can write in a human-like way a prompt that I explain in what type of face I want to generate. So for example, a front-facing, a young black adult female with brown eyes and long hair. GPT-3 extracts all the right information from this sentence. I can also write it a completely other way and it will still understand it. And it uses that as input for another AI model, namely a face generator. So this combined creates this application. The second one is to create a coding application without actually having the knowledge how to program code. In this case, it's Python, one of the larger programming languages. And by just asking GPT-3 in a human-like fashion to create an application that takes a user's name and welcomes the user, then GPT-3 generates the very code that exactly executes that if it were to run on a server. So now I can, without knowing how to code, create this application. So you've seen two examples, but there are many more. I'll start by quickly introducing OpenAI, the creator of GPT-3, and then we'll go into how GPT-3 works. Let's take a look at what we can and also cannot do with GPT-3, very important, and give a brief insight on DALL-E, OpenAI's latest AI model. That's super cool. And then we'll dive into the actual applications and end with the live demo. I have 3 really cool demos ready. I'm super excited about them myself, and they're very much in the field of finance, insurance, and legal. So, OpenAI. They've developed GPT-3 last year, and OpenAI is an organization with the goal to develop an artificial general intelligence, and mainly to benefit humanity. Artificial general intelligence means that a machine has the capacity to understand and to learn any intellectual task that a human being like me or Marco can, maybe even better. OpenAI has advanced the research in AI incredibly the last few years. For example, they beat the best Go player in the world. That is a highly complex board game. And they also defeated a lot of esports teams and have brought out a lot of papers. And that is very skilled because they only were founded in 2015, but by some very special people. So Elon Musk, most of you I think know him from Tesla, the Boring Company, Neuralink, SpaceX. But pretty early on, he dropped out due to conflict of interest with his other companies. Now, Sam Altman, former president of Y Combinator, is now the CEO. Ilya Sutskever, smart guy, came from Google Brain, now the chief scientist, and Greg Brockman, CTO from Stripe, and now CTO at OpenAI. And they started with some pretty big investments by Infosys, Y Combinator Research, Amazon Web Services, and they brought up $1 billion in 2015. And now only last summer, just before GPT-3 came out, Microsoft invested again another $1 billion in OpenAI, and also they gave their cloud services to train it, and they now have the kind of exclusive access to run all the services of GPT-3 on their platforms. So it's safe to say that OpenAI has gained a lot of trust by these companies and investors. Now, GPT-3. After 2 iterations, GPT-3 is the largest language model yet. But what does it actually stand for? It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. Generative means that it's specifically trained to generate text. Pre-trained means the folks at OpenAI were so generous to train it for us, and we can just start using it immediately. And finally, Transformer is the name of the architecture that is used behind the AI model. So let's take a look at how it works. GPT-3 gets inputs containing words, pieces of a sentence, and we ask GPT-3, please complete that sentence. So in this example, if we give it the first half of our bit statement, it would output the last half word for word. So like this. Now, how did GPT-3 learn to do this? It used a huge amount of textual data that was scraped from the internet, filtered, curated, and ended up being large, like 300 billion words. That's about 500 gigabytes of just text. GPT-3 stores all the information that it learned in 175 billion parameters. That's crazy. And it learned how to do it by using an unsupervised learning method. Let me show you how unsupervised learning works. So again, we take a random sample from that huge data set, in this case, very special it takes our mission statement. We are bit researching and prototyping ... Now, because this comes from our data set, we already know what the ending should be. However, GPT-3 does not know it yet. Now, GPT-3 has to try and predict the right word that comes after it. And in this example, if it were right, it would output studio. However, chances are the first time it sees this sentence, it gets it wrong. So maybe it would output group. Now, we know that is wrong. We say to GPT-3, hey, this is wrong. Please adjust your inner variables. One or some of these 175 billion parameters get changed by a little bit, and it tunes it in such a way that the next time it sees the exact same sentence, it will be more likely to output the right words, studio. Now, this information is stored in layers that are kind of described like this. A bit more technical, I won't go into detail. It has 100 of these types of layers, and these layers have about 2 billion parameters each. And the underlying method that the transformer models work on is called attention. And attention is the technique that looks at one word and sees how much influence that one word has on all the other words in the sentence. And it learns these importances during the training time. And then once it's been trained and we can execute and generate text, it uses these weights to generate text in a more plausible way. Now, that's in just a brief explanation how GPT-3 works. Let's take a look at what tasks it can perform. Because it was trained to generate text, and you thought, okay, it can do text generation. But in order to do text generation that's really human-like, by itself, it started to learn certain other textual tasks. These are, for example, story completion, answering knowledge questions, translation, and even some, but a bit poorly, mathematics. Because you can imagine, in order to come over as human-like, a certain amount of awareness of the world and the context and general knowledge is needed, because otherwise the text would just be random mumbling that is also grammatically correct. And we don't want that. We want actual texts. Now, how do we score text generation? Text generation is measured by the so-called Turing test. Alan Turing, our grandfather of computers, created a theoretical test to see if computers could have human-like performance. He did this in a way that both generated texts and handwritten texts are given to human testers. And these testers have to identify which is the generated one and which is the handwritten one. Now, OpenAI executed a test themselves, and humans could distinguish generated text from handwritten text 52% of the time. Now, take into account that just choosing a random option would result in a score of kind of a 50-50 chance. So then 52 all of a sudden sounds pretty good, right? Well, there's a new attempt to do kind of the largest scale Turing test yet on GPT-3. The AI core is starting it, and it will start in, well, this was from yesterday, so in 20 days. If you're interested in seeing how good it is, do check it out. And the third way to test it is that GPT-3 was ordered to write essays on various topics on college level. And the college professors graded it against other human people, other students. So they didn't know which one was human and which one was generated. And they actually got pretty good scores. Some B's, some C's, and once, well, an F. But one of the humans got an F as well. The second big thing for GPT-3 is translation. Translation from natural languages is scored in kind of a vague metric. It's called BLUE. In this case, all you need to know is that that means understandable to good translations. So text generation, translation, it can do pretty well. But there are some tasks GPT-3 should never be performed upon. And mainly the takeaway, the rule here is that you should not give GPT-3 full control over the content of the task. This means that we would give it no guidance on what to write. And this is very important, shown by a case here. In this case, a developer was creating a medical chatbot using GPT-3. And he created it in a way that the user could freely talk with GPT-3. And the GPT-3 had no constraints on what to answer or guidance of what it could and could not respond. And this resulted in a case where during a test, GPT-3 advised a thankfully fake patient to kill itself. Now, this is horrendous, and GPT-3 should never use it in such a way. This is why we need to give GPT-3 guidance in the content of the task we want to perform. So in this application, an assisting email writer, we give it guidance on the content by giving it a few bullet points that it has to convert to a proper email. So I give it the guidance on the content, and GPT-3 finish it for me. Now, all the applications I'll show today and also the live demos, they do have this form of guidance in there. So you can think how it works then. So we know it can do text generation, story completion, and we know we shouldn't use it in any contentless way or giving it no guidance on content. Before we dive into the applications, I want to briefly show DALL-E. DALL-E is the latest model of OpenAI, and it's the GPT-3 of images. It has only been published a few weeks ago, so it's brand new, and it was trained on the exact same method as GPT-3, the same type of architecture, and this time it used images instead of text. And this is so cool because it's super versatile. It really understands the context of the prompts you give it. And I just want to show some examples here. So in this case, DALL-E receives an input where we ask, please give me images of a soap dispenser in the shape of an avocado. Well, pretty silly prompt, but looking behind that, it's very, very awesome. So DALL-E is able to create not one, but hundreds or even thousands of images with all different creative implementations of this question. And this is huge in the field of AI, and I think it will have a big impact on the more creative industries as well. Another example, in this case, the prompt is very specific. So I ask for an emoji of a baby koala, very cute, but wearing a green hat, red gloves, yellow shirt, and blue pants. And about 80 to 90% of the time, it is actually able to create these exact instructions into the images. And it can not only do cartoons, it can actually create very realistic looking pictures as well. So in this case, a living room with white armchairs, painting of the Colosseum, and it's mounted above a modern fireplace. I mean, these look so awesome. How cool is that? They're like, I took a picture of a room. But these are all generated pictures, so these do not exist in the real world. That was a quick sidewalk into DALL-E. Now let's take a look at GPT-3 applications again. There are some applications within and outside of the finance, legal, and insurance that I'll go through. The first two I have already shown in a previous webinar, but they are too important for these specific industries to leave out today. The first one is to create a system that makes a layman like me on finance become an expert. By the way, this is a video. The current software doesn't support video, so I'll go through it slide by slide. In this application, GPT-3 uses my natural question to execute a balance sheet calculation. So on the left, in the blue, you can see me asking, I put in 20K in cash into the business. And now on the right, automatically by GPT-3, 20K is put in the field of cash, but also in the field of owner's investment. Now, my next question is, I prepay $900 for rent of the next 3 months. It now subtracts my cash from $900 from the cash, puts $900 into prepaid expenses. And the last question, I say, hey, I bought a 30K truck and I'll repay it in 5 years. So it puts 30K into my assets, but also 30K in long-term debt because it understands that repaying in 5 years means long-term debt. Very cool. I did just some calculation on a balance sheet while having no experience in finance at all. Now, an example in legal or insurance. And that's actually translating legalese to English and the other way around. So GPT-3 learned how to translate legalese to the plain English. So legalese is like legal jargon, difficult text for me. And I gave it 2 examples here. And by only giving it 2 examples, it learned how to execute this command. And now it can just start translating it. So whenever I give it a new legal class, it will automatically translate it to plain English. And we can also do it the other way around. So translating legalese back to English. So creating proper text from my plain English prompts. Also here it got 2 examples and it learned how to translate it. Here a bit more zoomed in. So for example, if I say, my landlord entered my apartment without my permission, and in this case, the user who made this is called plaintiff, the legal prompt would then be, the defendant entered plaintiff's dwelling without plaintiff's consent. Sounds pretty legal to me. My apartment had mold and it made me sick. Plaintiff's dwelling was infested with toxic and allergenic mold spores, and plaintiff was rendered physically incapable of pursuing his or her usual and customary vocation, occupation, and or recreation. Also sounds pretty legal to me. I'm no expert, but it sounds good. Another handy use case for everyone that uses a lot of textual work is, of course, grammar correction. Without even needing to give it an example, GPT-3 can start fixing your grammar by just asking nicely. Now, before we dive into the live demos, I want to give some applications outside of the industry that I found that were really cool. The first one is positive rephrasing. If I give it a very negative statement, GPT-3 will rephrase it in a more positive way for me and give me a few options to choose from. It can translate English to SQL. SQL is the database language, so to say, so I can interact with the database without having the technical knowledge. It can assist me on writing, so I write a little bit of text and it continues for me, but it can also rewrite. So based on what I've written, it can write it in a better way. It can actually generate charts by giving it the data and then asking, hey, please give me a bar chart of the precipitation, difficult word, for the next months, but also scatter plots or even heat maps. And it can create my Google Ads by giving it the name of my company, a bit of information about my company, some keywords I want to be tied to the ad, and then it creates a lot of ads that I can pick and choose the one that I like most. And finally, it can generate cover letters based on my resume. So based on my skills and my working experience, it creates this entire piece of text that I can send with my resume. Super cool. So remember the one rule: do give GPT-3 guidance in the content of the task. Each of these examples had such a guidance content principle. So for example, the resume one, the content guidance was my actual resume, and then it creates the cover letter around it. Now, it is showtime. It is time for a live demo. Because of the software, I will switch to my computer here. My camera will go off, and then I'll boot up the OpenAI beta access. All right. So welcome to the OpenAI playground, as they call it. I have 3 demos here. One is about answering questions from articles or from legal documents. The other is about summarizing more difficult legal text for a layman, for example. And the last one is about parsing a lot of textual data from text to a nice, predictable way. So I'll start with this one. As you can see, there's an article here, and it's about the coronavirus, and Joe Biden did some statements, and there's some numbers in there. So as one of the 2 example cases that I give to GPT-3, I asked it, how many cases of COVID peaked in January? Well, in the text here, it states that it was 300,000. So I manually entered the right answer. I did this a second time. So again, it's the same article. And I asked how many doses are being administered every day. And the last sentence of the article actually says 1.74 million doses. And I put the answer in there manually again. Now we can enter our own question and GPT-3 will answer it for us. So for example, one of the questions that we could ask is, it says here, we are on track by covering 15.3% of the population. So if we ask what percentage of the population is covered by vaccination, and we enter submit, it says 15.3. Isn't that wonderful? We can ask it a lot more questions. So for example, well, what country is this article about? It says once US and President Joe Biden. So if we ask this question, it should of course say the United States. So that's super cool. So it doesn't actually only copy the US, but it understands what the US is, what this article is about, and will say United States. We can, for example, ask another question, a final one for this one. Joe Biden did some statements and he warns people to stay vigilant. So we ask GPT-3 in this article, what did Joe Biden warn people to do? And it will say, stay vigilant. That's exactly what we need. So this way we can use GPT-3 to get questions or get answers that we have, give us answers on questions that we have about a piece of text. I can also show this for another case. In this case, it's about a Japanese billionaire who bought all the seats to a SpaceX mission to the moon and wants to invite 8 public people from the world to join with him and have a private ride to the moon. It's super crazy. For example, we could ask this question again. So in this case, we gave it the same articles as the last time. So this is the US, and now give it a completely new article and a new question. So what's the name of the Japanese guy? Oh, they don't like to answer it. They have a pretty strict policy on not creating like well, stuff like kill yourself. So that's really good. But in this case, it says Yuzuka Maezawa, and that's actually the name of the Japanese millionaire. Now, he said something about applicants needing to meet 2 criteria. They should advance whatever activity they do. They're into to help other people, and they should be willing to support other crew members. So this is a bit more of an elaborate answer that we could pick, or a question that we can put into GPT-3. So in this case, what criteria do the applicants have to meet? We ask it for the answer. Oh, I should up the response length. 1 second. So this response length means I want more words from GPT-3 because it's a bit of a longer answer. Now, this is very good. So it gives the exact answer. And again, I can make it just a little bit longer, 100 words. And it should output everything that I need. Oh, it did so. I just didn't scroll. So it says they should advance whatever activity, help other people, and are willing to support the other crew members. So let's apply this to a more legal doc case. So in this case, I took a random insurance document from the internet, and in there it had a statement about accidental damage or loss to buildings and if it was insured or not. So the first sentence states everything that is insured, it covers it. And the second one says accidental damage does not cover the loss of, well, a whole lot of other things. Again, I gave it 2 example questions. So does accidental damage cover skylights? And in here it says skylights, so the answer should be yes. The second one is to cover frost. It's actually in the not covered part, so the answer should be no. And now we can try out whether GPT-3 will actually keep continuing doing this the right way. So, for example, taking another question, does accidental damage cover glass in greenhouses? So it says here, fixed glass in windows, doors, fan lights, skylights, and greenhouses. So it should be yes. Now let's try out, see if it works. Voila, the answer is yes. The gods have spoken. Now, does accidental damage cover chewing by domestic pets? Well, I think you can guess that chewing, scratching, tearing or fouling by your domestic pets is, of course, not covered. So we will ask GPT-3. It says no. Awesome. Let's do a final one. Does accidental damage cover damage to gates? And let me see, where's gates? Yes, so it does not cover damage to gates, hedges, and fences. So the answer should be no again. Admit it, and it says no. So this shows that GPT-3 can take in the information of the insurance document, and by asking it questions, we can get the answer. Of course, this is a very brief document with only 2 rules, but you can see in more elaborate documents that it might be really handy to have this kind of search engine for insurance or legal documents. Now let's go to another insurance or legal class case. So this is about summarizing. I start out with an insurance clause, and in there it states a lot of things that could be very hard to read, difficult to read for a layman like me. So I gave GPT-3 a few examples on how to summarize. This first part says, if you pay the premium for or on account of this insurance, we agree to protect you from loss of money by any cause whatsoever, loss of or damage to safe or strong room directly associated with the theft, etc., etc. So this is the summary in just 3 lines instead of this entire thing. And I do that again with another insurance clause. It's a lot of text. But this is about when you are between 16 and 65 and you are hurt by someone with the aim to steal your money and it causes death or disablement, you will be paid as specified below. So this is a bit more summarized than the entire statement here. Now we have a few more insurance clauses that I want GPT-3 to summarize for me. So this is a brand new one. It's about terrorism and how the insurance will pay for terrorism. And it states, let me see, that by any person, any reason whatsoever, whether or not a such person who are acting, are excluded under within written policy. So there's some stuff excluded from the terrorism clause. So now I ask again, GPT-3, please make this comprehensible for me as a layman. Well, it's very brief. It just says any act of terrorism is excluded under this policy. And that's kind of the main takeaway. And it disregards all the special cases in here because that is not what should be in the summary. Let me show you another insurance clause. So if I change this one to this and remove this. Voila. So now we have a new insurance clause. We have the right to cancel this policy by giving you 7 days of notice by registered mail in writing to your last known address. If a claim has been made, you get no refund. If no claim has been made, we will give you a pro rata premium for kind of your the stuff you paid for but never used. So now we ask GPT-3, please summarize this for me again. And it says, we have the right to cancel this policy by giving you 7 days notice if a claim has been made, etc., etc. So what you see here is actually that the insurance clause is so short that the summary is pretty much the same for GPT-3. So you see it really works well on trying to have very large pieces of a document and get that in a very concise way summarized. Yeah, let's go to the final one, a really cool one as well. And that's about parsing unstructured data to a structured manner. So if you work maybe in customer service or, for example, customer service, and you ask someone, hey, what can I help you with? You will get a human response that is very difficult for computers to kind of automate. So to illustrate this, I wrote 6 inputs from different companies and what they need help with. So for example, the IT company BIT, they innovate by building prototypes. They have 50 employees and looking for financial help. Now I write another company in another way and also in another order. So another company is Philips, the name. They have 81,000 employees. And then I get into the field. And then I get a dot and ask and what they need help with. And then some more made-up companies. Intech Mac, 400 people working on building mechanical robots, and they need help filing legal documents. Shipped needs help with bookkeeping. So this time I start with the name and the help. Then I go into the amount of employees and in what domain they are. Another company that needs help with budgeting is Baker Boys. They work in a patisserie and they have 3 people working in their shop. So I don't say employees or whatever, I just say they have 3 people working. And finally, I'm a very fictive freelancer called Mirko, and he's working in design. And I need help setting up contracts. And what is special about this case is that I'm a freelancer. So I don't say I am one employee. I just say I'm a freelancer. Now let's see what GPT-3 makes of it. I ask it, please summarize it in this table using these columns: company name, industry, number of employees, and help needed. And the first 2 examples I wrote myself in order to help GPT-3 out and learn the task it has to execute. So now when I click submit, it should for all the 4 other cases do exactly this in an accurate way. Let's see if it works. So it did. As you can see, it took Intech Mac. They work in mechanical robots, have 400 people, and they need help filing legal documents. Shipped, freight transport, 3,000, bookkeeping, Baker Boys, patisserie, 3, and budgeting, and even Mirko, I work in design. And because I'm a freelancer, it understands I am with only 1 person, and I needed help setting up my contracts. That's the final demo. Let's go back to the final slides as well, and then we'll have the Q&A. Cool. So we just saw a search engine for insurance or legal documents. We saw summarizing of complex documents and parsing the textual data. Like Marco said, there's 9,000 people being born every hour. That's crazy. The world is getting bigger. We are getting more and more data, of which almost all of it is unstructured, like text is pretty unstructured. So these kind of language models will give us the tools to keep a grip on this ever-growing world. And like you just saw, we are very lucky to have the beta access. We applied half a year ago when it just got out, and we got it a few months ago. So if you have any ideas and you want to try it out that I didn't show yet, and want to try it your own case, let us know and see how we can help. That's it from my part.
Awesome. Thanks, Mirko. You'll be back in a couple of seconds. So that's it. The awesome Mirko, man, what a Yeah, what an honor that you that we've been working together for the last 4.5 years. Awesome stuff. So that was our GPT-3 webinar, people. Like we said, later on we'll be having a report or an ebook on financial technologies that we've been seeing. Last month we had Tech of China. This one is GPT-3. If you're looking forward to the next one, Tech of Energy, lots of sustainability tech in there as well. We'll be emailing you, and we hope to see you in the next webinar. If you want to stay up to date, we have our newsletter. Go to newsletter.wearebit.com. And every week, regarding a theme, we'll be telling you new articles and new, findings on new technologies. And that was it from my part. So we're having a Q&A, some questions. Are you ready, Mirko?
Yeah.
Good. Klim Mihailov asks, which
Neural network
architecture does GPT-3 use?
So it looks a bit like LSTM, like you proposed. It actually uses this transformer model. That's the background model in there. And it looks like LSTM because, well, for the experts out there, it uses this spatial and temporal reasoning, so it gets the context of all the words in the sentence. And for GPT-3, that's mainly done with that attention method, that you look at all the words in the sentence.
Nice. And Vivian asks, comparing to GPT-2, how much we think that the new language model has improved?
A lot. GPT-2 was released February last year. Also very popular in media, but the main constraint in there that it was a lot of mumbling. So it lacked this awareness of context of the world and the ability to complete stories in a logical way.
Right.
So GPT-2 and 3 are the exact same model, but GPT-3 just exploded in size, kind of brute forcing the knowledge that the model has.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Norbert, he asks, does GPT-3 support other languages like Dutch?
So low research languages like Dutch, so languages that aren't very prevalent on the internet, they always lag behind a little bit. For now, it doesn't. It does do some translation. It solves some Dutch in there, but not as good as the English model. So for application, you'll have to do some translation maybe with other tools or methods and then put it in GPT-3.
Yeah. Cool. Let me see. Sophia asks, will GPT-3 help define fake news?
I don't know. It will create some fake news, I'm afraid. So I think, Sophia, the GPT-3 is able to generate good text, and that means it can generate stuff that's not real. And we need to be very careful with releasing stuff like this into the open world. And also there's a lot of research being done in detecting generated text and generated images. So seeing if a picture or piece of text is actually real or not. That's like a detection on top of GPT-3.
Right. Other cool question here from Jelle. At what length will the GPT-3 results still remain robust, i.e. to provide the correct answer?
Yeah. So normally for these kinds of models, it's about 1,000 words that it can really grasp the context of. So the model is as big as 1,000 words at the same time. So you can put in 1,000 words at once and then ask it something. So that one will definitely work. For the others, I haven't tested it yet.
And there's another question. So, for example, in the example that you gave with the Japanese billionaire, what if there would have been 2 Japanese people in there?
Oh, interesting. I'm not sure. I think you can give it some guidance. So if there was a billionaire and a millionaire in there and you ask, what's the name of the Japanese billionaire? He'd know. If you ask plural, who are all the Japanese people in this text? He would output both.
Good. Let me see. All right, Frank asks, what would it answer if you would ask the insurance covers something that is not mentioned in the article?
It will probably make something up.
Yeah.
It has seen all these data sets from the internet, so it has some contextual knowledge. But there is a feature where you can actually see how probable the answer is. So if it's not in the text, it becomes more improbable. So it could flag like, I'm not really sure about this answer.
Right. And could you train it on that as well?
So currently, GPT-3, that's called fine-tuning. So
Right.
putting all your own documents in there. They're starting to work with certain companies to make fine-tune cases, but it's not super public yet in this beta access. But yeah, in theory, these models can be fine-tuned for your specific set of documents.
Right. Nice. Let me see. Axel, good to have you here, man. Asks, have you tried if GPT-3 works as well on Dutch legal documents?
I haven't
tried.
No, I haven't yet. And my guess is that if you wanted to work accurate like English, you should maybe translate the documents. That would be the easiest way, at least.
Yeah, and if we would use example legal documents, would it then be able to train on that, or isn't that good?
Like example Dutch legal documents, I think it can do something, but it just isn't as good as English.
Good.
That's pretty much it.
All right, let me see. Gilles. All right. Regarding Microsoft, if we know when to expect GPT-3 to be integrated in Microsoft products and in which ones?
I don't know yet. I know they open up their Azure platform for GPT-3. The beta currently runs on Azure. So that's, I think, a discussion they have in their back rooms together,
Right.
how to launch this or open this and when they'll do so.
Yeah, good. Which one would you see?
Ramses
What's up with Ramses?
asks, will GPT-3 will be able to answer when we can get invited into their public beta program? I love it. Funny.
Haven't tried?
Haven't tried.
No. All right, good. Albert, can I experiment using your beta access, or how to get this?
Yeah, so we have limited beta access right now. We have like one key we can use. I'm actually not super sure yet, but if you want to experiment, just contact us and we'll figure out how we'll manage it.
Good. Let me see. All right, the question, can the legal translation improved with the feed from a specific contract to create similar ones for other projects in other countries?
So let me see if I get the question straight. The legal translation improving with a feed from specific contracts.
So what I got from other questions as well is, for example, different countries have different kinds of rules.
Yeah.
Will it understand that?
So there's actually already a use case, not specifically GPT-3, but such a language model. So Lloyds Bank has this branch that's called the International Trading Advice. And they actually use such a language model to track legal documents in 200 countries, which are all a bit different, and then use the language model to automatically answer like 80% of the users' questions about specific rules in specific countries that also get updated quite frequently. So yeah, they actually turned their response time of 5 days to just 1 hour, and their team can now spend on doing like 20% of the difficult and fun questions to answer in Plaid, instead of like the repetitive, like something has been updated somewhere, I have to find out what it is.
Nice. All right. On a more personal note from Vivian, are there any openings for a soon-to-be graduate in NLP and AI?
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. There are. All right. Is it already possible, from Murat, is it already possible to analyze voice instructions or easy to implement for analphabetic usage?
So analyze voice instructions. pretty much means, like you saw with the face generation example, it is combining GPT-3 with another tool. Voice instructions can be transcribed with another tool that already works really well nowadays, and then you could put those instructions into GPT-3.
Good. So Microsoft bought it. They've tried Bing.
Yeah.
Will this be a? We've seen search tools maybe even better than Google, or at least different than Google.
Yeah.
How would that work?
So for Microsoft, so first of all, they didn't specifically buy GPT-3 itself. No. They invested in OpenAI as a whole, and I think that really is in line with their strategy in AI on Azure. So they have been building for a few years, all these plug and play AI servers on Azure. So less technically skilled people can also start using AI on their platforms. And I think this is one of the big investments for the same strategy. Search engine specifically, I mean, GPT-3 knows stuff because it has seen a lot of information on the internet. However, that is like one data set of the past few years. So it's not updated all the time. So the latest news of yesterday is not in the database of GPT-3. So asking trivia questions about something that happened yesterday, they'll not know the answer about. So in that way, a search engine out of the blue, I don't think it's viable, but inputting your own data set and searching on that with GPT-3, kind of fine-tuning it that way, that's very viable.
Awesome. Good. I think we're at the end. So people, we found this awesome to do. Like I said, next month we'll be having a new webinar on energy. We are really looking forward to that. Like I said, you've been coming in numbers again. So thanks that you've chosen to be here this morning. We hope to see you soon. Thanks for this webinar.
Bye-bye.
Later.